In this video, we will go the whole way from the quarries, where the Romans mined stone, to the secret channels inside the aqueduct itself. We will examine 6 riddles of Pont du Gard that are not mentioned in textbooks. You will see why the mathematics of this structure do not match the official version. You will find out what strange tool archaeologists found at the bottom of the channel and why it should not have been there at all. We will talk about why the Romans needed to build a bridge of such insane height if there was an easier and cheaper way, and why some researchers believe that the secret of Roman concrete, which holds these stones together, we still cannot reproduce today. And we will also look into one theory, which claims that Pont du Gard was not originally built as an aqueduct at all, but that it had a completely different purpose. Each of these facts, individually, is just a curious detail, but when you put them together, the picture turns out to be not at all the one you were shown in history lessons. Ready? Then let us start from the very beginning, from the place where all this has been standing for 20 centuries, and from a question that, for some reason, no one asks out loud. Southern France, Provence. The Garden River meanders between limestone cliffs, overgrown with Mediterranean shrubs. The air smells of lavender and heated stone. And then, from around the corner, he appears 3 tiers of arches, 49 meters in height, 275 meters in length, 60,000 tons of stone laid without a single drop of mortar. The blocks of the lower tier weigh up to 6 tons each. Some even more. They simply lie on top of each other and have been holding for 2 millennia. When you stand at the bottom and look up, the first feeling is not admiration. It is confusion, because the brain refuses to accept the scale. But here is what engineers discovered. When they began detailed measurements in the 20th century, each stone block is unique. There are no 2 alike. Each is cut for a specific place in the construction. This means that, before construction began, someone had to design the entire structure as a whole, every stone, every joint, every angle, without drawing programs, without calculators, on wax tablets and papyrus. And this is where the strangest thing begins. On many blocks, carved marks have been preserved, Roman numerals, letters, symbols. This is a kind of instruction. Which block to put where, in essence, an assembly scheme, like IKEA, only made of 6-ton stones. And this instruction is 2,000 years old. Modern architects say that to design something similar today, a team of engineers with access to BIM modeling, special software for 3-dimensional building design, would be required. And the Romans did it by eye. The official version sounds simple. Pont du Gard was built around the 1st century Anno Domini to deliver water from the springs of Uzès to the city of Nîmes. An ordinary aqueduct, a utilitarian structure, a water pipe, essentially. But if it is just a water pipe, why such scale? Why build a structure the height of a 16-story house? Why cut each stone individually when standard blocks could have been used? And most importantly, why do it in a place where the Garden River floods with monstrous force? The Romans knew perfectly well that this river was unpredictable. Floods here occur regularly. In the year 2002, the water rose to the level of the first tier of arches, and in some years even higher. Why not choose another place? Why not bypass the gorge? Why specifically here? One of the popular theories sounds like this: Pont du Gard is not an engineering masterpiece. It is an engineering error. Some researchers believe that during the initial reconnaissance of the route, a miscalculation occurred, that the engineers incorrectly estimated the height difference and only in the process of construction realized that in order for the water to reach Nîmes with the necessary slope, it was necessary to raise the channel by 50 meters. That is, Pont du Gard is not an elegant solution. It is an emergency correction of an error that was cheaper to patch with a giant bridge than to redo the entire route from scratch. There is another version, even stranger. A number of alternative historians claim that such a level of precision and coordination was impossible for the Roman Empire, that the Romans used knowledge obtained from a more ancient civilization, perhaps the same one that is behind the megalithic buildings all over the world. Sounds crazy, perhaps, but wait until you hear about the accuracy of the slope. Most modern scientists stick to a more prosaic version. The Roman school of engineering by the 1st century Anno Domini was incredibly developed. They had a clear hierarchy of builders. From architects to stonemasons, they used a tool called a groma, a simple wooden cross with plumb bobs that allowed them to maintain accurate verticals and horizontals, and for measuring slopes, they had a chorobates, a long horizontal rail with a water level. It is primitive, yes, but it worked. And it worked with a precision that we have difficulty reproducing today. As for the choice of location, scientists believe that the Romans conducted a large-scale geodetic reconnaissance of the entire valley. They knew that the Garden Gorge was the narrowest in this area. Any other route would have required either a significantly longer aqueduct or the laying of underground tunnels through the rocks, which would have been even more expensive. So, Pont du Gard is not a mistake. It is the optimal solution under strict constraints. At least, that is what official science says. But here is what is haunting. If the Romans had such precise tools, if they could design each stone individually, if they conducted a full reconnaissance of the terrain, then why did they not leave a single drawing, a single plan, a single document describing the construction of Pont du Gard? We know the names of Roman generals, poets, even cooks, but we do not know the name of the person who designed one of the greatest engineering structures in history. Why? Where did the drawings go? And were they there at all? Maybe this knowledge was transmitted not on paper, but in some other way. If you have watched to this point, do not forget to like, and also write in the comments where you are watching us from. We are interested in where our stories reach. Enjoy the viewing. Let us move away from the bridge. Step back and look at the whole system as a whole. Because Pont du Gard is not just a bridge, It is only the most spectacular part of a 50-kilometer aqueduct that stretches from the Ure Spring near the city of Uzes to the water distribution hub in Nîmes. The so-called Castellum, 50 kilometers of stone channel through hills, valleys, forests, rocks, most of it underground. Some sections are cut directly into the rock. Somewhere, the channel goes along the surface, on stone supports, and all this is a single continuous system. Imagine this route 50 kilometers is the distance from the center of Moscow to Sergiev Posad, or from Kyiv to Boryspil and back, and along this entire length, the water had to flow by itself, without a single pump, only under the action of gravity. The difference in altitude between the Ure, Spring, and Nîmes is only 17 meters over 50 kilometers. This is a slope of 0.34%. Let me translate this. Means that for every kilometer, the water drops by 34 centimeters. Imagine you put a ruler 1 kilometer long and lift one end of it to the height of a can of Coca-Cola. That is the slope, but that is not all. In some sections, the slope is even smaller, only 7 centimeters per kilometer. 7 centimeters, the thickness of a chocolate bar for a whole kilometer. And with such a slope, the water flowed, did not stand still, did not stagnate, flowed evenly, stably, continuously. According to scientists' calculations, the aqueduct delivered about 40,000 cubic meters of water a day to Nîmes. That is about 20 Olympic swimming pools every day. And now, think about it. We live in the era of GPS, satellite geodesy, and laser levels. A modern geodesist can measure a height difference with an accuracy of a millimeter at any distance. But even today, maintaining a slope of 7 centimeters per kilometer over rough terrain through rocks and ravines is considered a complex engineering task, and the Romans did it with wooden rails and rope plumbobs in the 1st century Anno Domini, without electricity, without optics, without the mathematical apparatus that will appear only 1,500 years later. This is where cognitive dissonance begins. Because one of two things is true. Either the Roman tools were significantly more accurate than we think, or we fundamentally do not understand something about how they worked. Some engineers propose an unexpected hypothesis that such precision was impossible to ensure at the design stage, that the Romans acted by trial and error, built a section, let the water through, looked at how it flows, corrected, essentially tuned the aqueduct like a musical instrument, by sound and by feel. It sounds romantic, but there is a problem. The channel passes through rocks, is cut into the cliff. Correcting an error in a rock tunnel is not moving a brick. It is recutting dozens of meters of stone. The price of an error is colossal. And there is another version, completely radical. A group of alternative researchers claims that the slope of the Nîmes aqueduct suspiciously coincides with the mathematical proportions found in the Egyptian pyramids and in the megalithic buildings of South America. They see this as evidence of a single ancient knowledge. transmitted from civilization to civilization long before Rome. A coincidence is possible, but the coincidences in this story are becoming a bit too many. Academic science explains the accuracy of the aqueduct more simply, and it must be admitted, convincingly, the Romans used aqueducts, a tool described by the architect Vitruvius back in the 1st century before the Common Era. This is a wooden rail about 6 meters long, with a groove on the upper side. Water was poured into the groove. If the water stands level, the surface is horizontal, simple, and brilliant. With the help of such a tool, an experienced land surveyor could sequentially, step by step, lay a line with a minimum slope. Yes, it is slow. Yes, it requires thousands of measurements for every kilometer, but it works. In addition, the Romans had enormous experience. By the time of the construction of the Nîmes aqueduct, the empire had already built dozens of similar structures throughout the Mediterranean. Each new project was more perfect than the previous one. So, from the scientific point of view, no mysticism, just very qualified labor multiplied by a century of practice. But here is what does not fit into this harmonious picture. Vitruvius's chorobates was 6 meters long. To measure the slope over 50 kilometers, more than 8,000 sequential measurements must be made, and each subsequent measurement depends on the accuracy of the previous one, the slightest error, and it accumulates like a snowball. By the end of the route, the error could be meters, not centimeters, but the error of the Nîmes aqueduct is minimal. How? How did they control the accumulation of error over 50 kilometers? What verification mechanism did they use? Not a word about this, neither in Vitruvius, nor in Pliny, nor in any of the Roman authors. 8,000 measurements, and not a single critical error with a wooden rail and water. Either we were not told everything about Roman tools, or they had something else, something we do not know about. Come closer, right up to it. Run your finger along the joint between 2 blocks of the lower tier. No gap, no mortar. 2 blocks weighing several tons are pressed so tightly that it is impossible to slide a knife blade between them. Researchers have tried 60,000 tons of stone without a single drop of binder have been standing for 20 centuries. In the 1990s, French archaeologists discovered that the contact surfaces of the aqueduct blocks were processed with a precision of less than 2 millimeters deviation from an ideal plane on stones the size of a dining table. But that is not all. Each arch of the first tier has a slightly different curvature, not because of an error, but because each one is calculated individually for a specific load, for a specific section of rock, for a specific depth of the river. Each arch is a separate engineering project. According to textbooks, the greatness of Rome was in standardization: roads, barracks, baths, everything standard, everything according to a template. But Pont du Gard is the complete opposite. Each block is unique. Each arch is individual. Each joint is fitted by hand. Why did an empire built on efficiency suddenly abandon all its principles for the sake of one bridge? Some researchers point to the similarity of the dry masonry of Pont du Gard with megalithic structures in other parts of the world. Sacsayhuaman in Peru, the Valley Temple in Giza, Great Zimbabwe, everywhere. Giant stones without mortar with incredible precision of fitting, universal engineering logic, or traces of a single technology that existed long before all these civilizations. And here is an uncomfortable question: if dry masonry is such an obvious solution, why do we not do it anymore? Our concrete bridges collapse after 50 years, and a stone bridge without mortar stands for 20 centuries. Dry masonry is not mysticism. When two perfectly fitted blocks are pressed by their own weight, the force of friction makes them practically immobile. Moreover, dry masonry is flexible. During an earthquake, the blocks shift and return to their place. A structure on cement will crack. Dry masonry will withstand. And the precision of processing was achieved by grinding with flat abrasive stones, laborious, but no supernatural technology. But here is a detail that does not fit 50,000 unique blocks. According to archaeological data, the bridge was built in 5 to 15 years. This means hundreds of stonemasons simultaneously each cuts a unique stone, and each block must fit perfectly into its place. The marks on the stones tell where to put the block, but do not explain how to ensure the perfect joint between stones cut by different people in different places. A puzzle of 50,000 pieces cut blindly, and each fits perfectly. Try to explain this with wax tablets. Let us move to Nîmes. Today, a quiet Provençal town. 2,000 years ago, Nîmes was one of the largest cities of Roman Gaul, 50,000 inhabitants. A forum, an amphitheater, baths, and in the heart of the city, the castellum, a water distribution hub, a circular stone basin with 10 holes through which water was distributed throughout the city. Water flowed here through Pont du Gard. But why Nîmes stands on its own source? Nemausus. The Celts lived here for centuries, without an aqueduct. When archaeologists calculated the actual water consumption of the Roman city, it turned out that the local source was enough. Then why a 50-kilometer aqueduct costing millions of sesterces? The answer sounds almost absurd for the sake of baths. For the sake of fountains. About 80% of the water went to public baths and decorative nymphea, one of the greatest structures in history, so that officials could take hot baths. We are told the Romans were rational engineers. Every decision was calculated. But what rationality is there in spending the resources of an entire province on water for fountains? The first theory is political. Pont du Gard is not a water pipe, but a demonstration of imperial power, propaganda in stone, a message to the conquered Gauls. We can make water flow through the air. The second is economic. The aqueduct served not only the city, but also the agricultural territory around it. There were branches that we have not yet found. The third, most provocative one, the aqueduct was built much earlier than the 1st century. and the Romans only repaired an already existing system. There is almost no evidence, but no one has been able to disprove it either. Roman baths are not a luxury. They are a center of social life, a place for deals and politics, and fountains are a cleaning system. Running water washed away waste, reduced the risk of epidemics, cooled the air. A city without a constant flow of water simply could not function as a full-fledged Roman metropolis. Everything is logical, except for one thing. The aqueduct stopped working in the 6th century. Nîmes passed under the control of barbarians, and the city survived without the aqueduct, without the baths. That same spring again became the only source, and it was enough. The city lived without the aqueduct before it and lived after. So why was it built? Maybe we should ask not why the aqueduct was built, but why specifically this kind of aqueduct was built so complex, so redundant. If the goal was simply water, there were simpler solutions. Unless the goal was something else, let us go down inside into the water channel. A narrow corridor, a little more than a meter in width. The walls are covered with a thick, reddish-gray layer lime deposits accumulated over centuries. In some places, their thickness is half a meter. This is where things begin that do not fit into any theory. The inner surface of the channel is covered with opus signinum, a mixture of lime and crushed ceramics. A simple recipe. When chemists from MIT analyzed the samples, they found hot inclusions, microscopic clusters of lime that work as a self-healing system. A crack appears. Water gets inside. The lime dissolves and fills the damage. The coating repairs itself for 2,000 years. We are only beginning to develop similar technologies in laboratories while clearing deposits in the channel. Fragments of tools belonging to the pre-Celtic period were found walled up in the most ancient layers. Part of the finds was discovered not in the deposits, but in the masonry itself, as if they had been there from the very beginning. Official science says the tools got into the channel with water from the source. But some researchers are not satisfied with this. Ritual sacrifice or evidence that the channel is older than we are told. The technology of Roman concrete appeared as if from nowhere and disappeared with the fall of Rome completely for 500 years. How can an entire industry evaporate without a trace? Proponents of the theory of lost knowledge use this as a key argument. What if progress is not a straight line up but a wave with peaks and troughs? And some peaks in the past were higher than we think. The secret is in Pozzolano, volcanic ash from near Naples. When mixed with lime, it creates crystalline structures of incredible strength. The recipe did not appear out of nowhere. The Romans experimented with additives for centuries. And the loss of knowledge is explained simply. The technology was passed from master to apprentice. The empire collapsed. The chain was broken. Tragic, but explainable. Let us assume, but a self-healing coating, a material working at the molecular level. We, a civilization that launched rovers to Mars, are only beginning to understand how this works. And the Romans, without microscopes and knowledge of chemistry, somehow created this on an industrial scale. A coincidence? Or did they know something we do not know? Let us return to the Gardon, now a quiet turquoise river. But this is a deception. The Gardon is one of the most unpredictable rivers in France. Autumn rains raise the water level by 20 meters in one night. In the year 2002, a catastrophic flood occurred. The water reached the first tier, 1,000 tons of flow carrying trees and boulders. A modern road bridge nearby, made of steel and reinforced concrete, suffered serious damage. Pont du Gard, a stone bridge without mortar, 2 millennia, old, not a scratch. After the flood, engineers discovered the supports of the lower tier are pointed on the side of the flow like the bow of a ship. This is a hydrodynamic solution that reduces water pressure. Modern engineers calculate such forms on computers, but that is not all. In the base of the arches, they found, through holes, specially left openings. During a flood, they let part of the flow through, reducing pressure on the structure like a relief valve in an industrial boiler. The Romans designed a protection system on the principles of hydrodynamics, which will be formalized only after 18 centuries. A contradiction with official history. Hydrodynamics is not something mastered by trial and error. You cannot build a bridge, wait for a flood, see how it is washed away, and say, next time, we will sharpen the supports. There will be no next time. The Romans had to know in advance. Without formulas, without computer modeling, there is a hypothesis about large-scale models, physical modeling in miniature, plausible. But not a single such model has been found. Not a single description of such experiments. Others point out, the principle of pointed supports is found in structures significantly older than Rome in Mesopotamia, Mohenjo-daro, in Sri Lanka, everywhere. There is one logic of working with water, an invisible chain of masters across centuries and continents. Rome absorbed the knowledge of dozens of peoples, Greeks, Phoenicians, Egyptians. Pointed supports were used long before Pont du Gard. The Romans brought other people's finds to perfection, combining them with dry masonry and an arched construction. There were no formal equations, but there were hundreds of years of observations. Each destroyed structure gave information. Pont du Gard is the peak of evolution through selection. Beautiful, but Pont du Gard is one of the earliest large aqueducts in Gaul. It was built at the beginning and not at the end of the evolutionary chain. Many later aqueducts are inferior to it in complexity and durability. The masterpiece appeared before the drafts. It is as if a writer's first novel turned out to be better than everything he would write in his life. Or the experience invested in Pont du Gard was obtained not in Rome, but somewhere else. By someone else, long before the first legionnaire on the banks of the Gardon. Let us put it all together: a bridge without mortar, as high as a 16-story house, a slope of 0.34%, over 50 kilometers without lasers, 50,000 unique blocks without computer models, a self-healing coating working on principles discovered 20 years ago. hydrodynamic protection from a science that did not exist for another 15 centuries. And all this for the sake of water for baths for 2 millennia. And it stands. What if progress is not a straight line up but a wave? And some peaks in the past were higher than ours. Pont du Gard does not give an answer. It stands silently, stone upon stone, without mortar, without drawings. It has survived the empire, barbarians, Vars, floods, and it will stand when our concrete bridges crumble into dust. Maybe someday we will understand. Find the drawings. Reveal the last secret. Or maybe some riddles exist, not to be solved but to remind us we know much less about the past than we would like to think. If this video made you think, write in the comments genius or error, lost knowledge, or just good engineering. And if you have watched until this moment, subscribe so as not to miss the next story.